So, today we're going to tackle a question that honestly affects pretty much every agreement we ever make. If you've got a written contract, can a simple handshake or a phone call actually change the rules? We're going to dig into this through the really fascinating case of the forgotten clause. Okay, so picture this. You're working on something, the deadline is looming, and you're just not going to make it. You call up the client, they're super chill, and they say, hey, no problem, take an extra week. And you breathe this huge sigh of relief. But should you? Is that casual verbal promise enough to override the official contract you both signed? All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. We're going to follow a real-life legal drama that actually gives us a surprisingly clear answer. We'll start with that initial handshake deal, then we'll uncover a hidden clause that messes everything up, watch the legal tug-of-war that followed, see what the Supreme Court finally decided, and wrap up with the big one, what this all means for you. So our story starts with a company called Rock Advertising and its landlord, MWB. It's a totally classic business situation, the kind of thing that could happen to literally anyone. Okay, so here's the setup. Rock Advertising is renting office space, but things are tough and they start falling behind on the rent. So the director of Rock gets on the phone with the landlord's credit controller, and he claims they work out a whole new payment schedule right there on the call. You know, a classic handshake deal over the phone. Problem solved, right? Well, not quite. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because the solution wasn't about what they said on the phone. It was about something that was already written down in their original agreement. A single sentence, probably buried in the fine print, that was about to cause a massive legal headache. And here is our culprit. It's called a no oral modification clause, or a NOM clause for short. It's a pretty standard thing to find in contracts, and its job is simple: to stop the exact thing that just happened. It says flat out, if you want to change this agreement, you can't just talk about it. You have to put it in writing, and both sides have to agree to that new writing. And this, right here, is the million-dollar question. What wins? You've got this brand new verbal promise on one side. But on the other, you've got this old written rule that says you can't make a verbal promise. So which one is more powerful? The freedom to make a new deal on the fly, or the solid certainty of the original contract? You can probably guess this wasn't an easy one to answer. In fact, it kicked off this huge legal debate that went all the way up the chain, creating a fascinating legal tug-of-war. And this slide just lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you have this big idea called party freedom. It basically says, hey, it's their contract, they should be free to change it however they want, even with just a conversation. But on the other side, you have contract certainty. And this idea argues that the whole point of writing things down is to avoid messy he said, she said arguments. What's in the document is what matters, period. And you can totally see this battle play out as the case moves through the courts. First up, the initial judge sides with the landlord, MWB. He says the written clause is king. But then Rock Advertising appeals, and whoa, the Court of Appeal completely flips the script. They say the verbal agreement was valid, because by making it, the two sides basically agreed to ignore their own rule. I mean, total confusion, right? So it all had to go to the UK Supreme Court for a final showdown. So after all that disagreement, all that legal back and forth, how did the highest court in the land finally settle this huge question about how contracts work? The verdict was clear, it was unanimous, and it was decisive. The Supreme Court sided with the written word. They said that the no oral modification clause is absolutely valid and it has to be respected. And that friendly agreement over the phone, legally speaking, it wasn't binding. The original written contract was the one that mattered. So why? Well, the court's reasoning was all about certainty. They said these NOM clauses are there for a really good reason. They stop people from accidentally changing important contracts, they avoid misunderstandings, and they prevent those awful arguments over who promised what. So the court decided that enforcing the rule that says get it in writing is the best way to protect everyone involved. Now look, this isn't just some dusty legal story. This decision has very real consequences for all of us, anytime we sign anything. A freelance gig, a lease, you name it. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Okay, here's what you need to do. First, from now on, always look for a no oral modification clause in the fine print. Second, just accept that relying on a spoken promise to change a contract is incredibly risky. The law's just not on your side there. So what do you do instead? Make email your best friend. After any important phone call, send a quick message that says, hey, just confirming our chat, we agreed to X, Y, and Z. That creates a written record. And for really big changes, you got to make it official. draft a proper written amendment, and get everyone to sign it. So this case gives us a clear rule, which is great for certainty. But it also leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? Rock Advertising really believed they had a new deal. They were acting based on that belief. Is a system that puts the cold, hard text of a contract above what might feel like a fair, reasonable agreement always the right way to go? It's a huge tension in the law, and it's something worth thinking about.